It's the same thing that's happening in the economy of the United States is happening in the dental industry, where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer and the middle class is getting squeezed. And what I mean by that is that the really good dental offices that have their operational systems down and have the things in place that they need to have in place are actually thriving. And the bottom feeders are the people who've always struggled, that bottom 10%, that class is getting bigger, unfortunately.
Most people still do not have that great grand view of where they're going or what it takes to get there. And I know that's zooming out for a minute, but most people don't really know what it's required for them to get the result they're talking about. If they're talking about going 4 locations or 20 locations or even staying at one large location, they still aren't seeing what it actually takes to do that. And number 3, operational mastery. When we get into that place, marketing is a key one.
Welcome back to another episode of Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the owner of SMC National, where we help offices just like yours level the playing field against the big guys out there so you can grow the way that you want. But a lot of times the things that's slowing you down from growing are the things that are happening in between your ears, and it's not always what you think. Today, I have an amazing national speaker, CEO of Tower Leadership, and author, thought leader, Eric Morin, and he's going to break down the 5 things that he's seeing that's slowing down dental offices from growing the way that they should. And really, this applies to all businesses, but this was such a value-packed show. You're going to learn a lot from it. Stay tuned. All right, we are live, and this is going to be a good one. I promise you it's going to bring a lot of value to you, because Eric and I were just sitting here chatting before we pressed record, and he has some hot stuff that I promise you it's not going to be from the perspective that you're used to hearing it. So Eric, why don't you tell us, you said you had this framework, the 5 things that you guys work with tons of dentists all across the United States. And there's this 5-step process, if you will, or 5 things that are hanging people up, that where they get stuck when they're growing a practice. And I know the people that are listening to this are people who've gotten stuck before. So what are those 5 things?
This subject, this is a fun subject. And by the way, I'm glad to be back on your podcast again. It's been too long, my friend. I always, by the way, before I even jump into that, I love what's happening in the marketplace. Even though people see it right now as we're seeing this inflection point within the industry, and we're seeing multiple inflection points. And so it's this time where people are innovating, adapting, changing, moving. And so it's a really great time.
It's the same thing that's happening in the economy of the United States is happening in the dental industry, where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer and the middle class is getting squeezed. And what I mean by that is that the really good dental offices that have their operational systems down and have the things in place that they need to have in place are actually thriving. And the bottom feeders are the people who've always struggled, that bottom 10%, that class is getting bigger, unfortunately. And so you really need to be in that top. You want to be in that top 15% of practices. You don't want to be in the bottom 15% of practices.
And there's still that mindset shift. I was talking to a doctor recently. We just got off with him about an hour ago, and he's taking his practice from about 2 million to 15, 16 million. And so I looked at him, I said, okay, what do you want to do now? And he says, I'm good. I want to keep growing and building. And then I pushed him, and I was like, okay, are you sure you want me to tell you where you can take this? What I mean by that is there's still, no matter even that level of success, even when you push there, there's like, what's the mindset? What's the next step? What's the next step? And sometimes you can push too big. And sometimes I'm probably guilty of pushing people a little too much. I'm like, are you sure you're ready for this? And I say that because to say that no matter where somebody is in the process, mindset still, even before we get to tactical things, right? We can talk about all the tactical moves, which I think are important, legitimate. It's so important at this point to be looking at those things. Because you do have scalable operations, as you were talking about, and scalability in marketing. Like this gentleman was a great example of first thing we had to do is scale out his operations and scale his marketing and scale. But then there's other parts where what else holds up. It's interesting. Before I even get into this, I want to tell you the story. This is a good example of this. So I had a doctor the other day, and by the way, before we even started today, we were saying we could talk for hours. But I had this doctor. It was about 2 weeks ago, and I was on this conversation with him, and he's done really well, but he got stuck, and he couldn't grow anymore, and I just couldn't. Like he just kept going almost backwards, and so I finally just grabbed him for a second. And I said, "What's going on? Why are you going backwards?" And he admitted that there was this kind of upper limit problem that he, as on his growth path and trajectory, he had been, other people had said, you think you're better than us, you think you're all that, you think, and started getting in his head And so he stopped growing because he was worried about people's perception that he thought he was better than them. And so we go into all these tactical moves, which we can talk about linear versus exponential. And that's one of the things I was saying before we even started today is I think people are so focused on linear, they sometimes forget about the exponential moves. But but at the same time, you're also throwing in a mindset, and why I bring that is to say, how many times does mindset also play a role, whether be scarcity mindset in more of a sophisticated look at that, or it's just who people spend time with, or do they think they can get it, the capital or whatever it ends up being. So when I look at this marketplace, there's a lot of different things that are happening, but linear versus exponential, and then how do you make the exponential moves happens with mindset. So going back on my original question, because I'll go down a path, but the original thing is I was on a plane. We were talking about this before we started. And I was thinking about where people get stuck. And I was thinking about the five kind of tiers, where people are growing. And the first thing I started saying was that percent that's still in that entrepreneurial illusion type phase, right? Which is, I'm not really an entrepreneur yet. I'd like to be an entrepreneur. I own a practice, but that's still a group. Whether that group is here in 10 years is a good question. Um, but that group is still out there where you have to almost get them to the place where they become entrepreneurs. Then we get people to a place where they're scaling, where they've added some doctors, where they've added a location, where they've added those types of things. But the third one where I see people get caught up the most, which is the operational point where I still think so many practices, because most of our practices are groups or aspiring groups, and I still see people get caught up on the operational piece, which is that they want to grow. For instance, they're making linear moves, they're growing exponentially as well, but they get caught up on the operational piece. And you probably talked about it a gazillion times on your podcast, but I'm still seeing a lot of people get stuck there.
So break that down in a way that I love where you're going, but break it down for a dentist who, when you talk about exponential growth and things like that, what does that mean? They're moving, they're growing. What is actually happening in their brain that's preventing them from growing from that point?
Voting is open for Dental Woo's top dental podcast. It starts on November 1st and ends on December 31st. Each vote supports the podcast. Last year, we won multiple top spots, and this year, we're hoping to do even better. This year, our goal is to get 1,000 unique voters on this podcast. Help us reach our goal, and your vote will count. Voting is easy. Just click the link below and find Dental Marketing Go, and then submit it. It's super fast.
First part is be careful of not promoting people to their incompetence. And I still see so much promotion to incompetence. And that sounds so harsh, but it's just true that so many people are still trying to promote Susie to a position that she's not qualified for and trying to help her get there. But the doctor isn't really strong in operations either. So he's trying or she's trying to coach somebody who's not strong in operations to become strong in operations. And the ceiling of this person, they've already hit their ceiling because they're not ready to do the position today.
Let me break that down for the doctors listening here in a different way. It would be like a new college grad student graduating from college, and then they are clinically in charge of teaching all of your dentists the clinical skills, but they aren't in a position to be able to do that. And that's a hard pill to swallow. Everybody understands that when I say it, but it's a hard pill to swallow when you're the one that's the leader that is weak in the area that you're trying to help them elevate.
It takes courage. And one of the things I tell people is if you're promoting someone to their incompetence and they're not going to be successful, you're not actually serving anybody. So it's interesting because you might think, well, that stuff just happens when you're at maybe 2 million or 3 million. I see it at 17 million, Gary. I still see it happening where organizations, their executive team, whatever that looks like, is getting stuck at a ceiling and they're not able to get past that. And they think that they're helping people out, but those people oftentimes in the long run hold the organization back. They get fired in the long run anyhow, or whatever ends up happening. So I do think that people get stuck at operational mastery and optimization, really optimizing things. And we can get in operations for 42 podcasts in a row if we wanted to, but keeping it just simple. I always tell people this: if you're in charge of the practice and you think to yourself, nothing gets done without me making sure it gets done, then you know you've outgrown your operations. It's that simple. If you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm the one who's got to make sure that happens. I'm the one who's got to make sure the doctors get hired. I'm the one who's got to find the new location. I'm the one who's got to make sure everyone's doing the KPIs and scorecards. I'm the one who's got to do that. If I'm the one who's got to think through all of those things, then I've outgrown my operations. That means I'm limited by my ability to then get and be in charge of every process getting done. And if I'm at that place, I know that I do not have the right operational team. And any entrepreneur who's ever been in a business ever has been at the place where they woke up and said, I'm doing it all and I got to make sure everything happens. And so that's what I would say about the operational side is if it's all on you, you've outgrown your team.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just to comfort the people listening, as you just said, everybody's been here. And the things that made you good at the beginning actually become a hindrance later on in your entrepreneur journey. Meaning, the thing that makes you good at the beginning is that you are willing to do anything. I'll be the janitor. I'll answer the phones. I'll do anything, and that's actually a good thing because if you were just like, nope, I'm not. I'm only doing dentistry. I'm not going to do anything else. Then you can't open a practice and be the owner of it. Like that's just how it works. But over time, you have to learn how to elevate other people beyond yourself, and that you doing everything actually hinders them from doing that. And so it's a weird shift that happens in your practice that, okay, you've built a foundation, you've been successful. Now you're going to meet somebody like Eric and he's going to challenge you on the way that you're thinking. And there's a transition that has to happen in your brain. I love that point. It's super strong. And I've been there personally. I'm sure you have as well. And I think every entrepreneur goes through that at some point.
And multiple times, because there comes to be a point in time in a dental practice's growth that you have to invest in management in a way you've never invested in management before. And when you get to that place, you start to think, okay, am I willing? And that's that hurdle. There's just a mental hurdle that happens there. And I see people stay in this zone way too long, Gary. I just see them sit there and it takes them 2 years to make the move that they could have made in a few months. And that hinders their ability to grow, especially from from a linear and an exponential standpoint. It really hinders their ability to get things done. And so I see that step 3, that kind of tier of growth, they get stuck at. And I see people get stuck at there more than anything else. 4, I would say, is leadership. I put down leadership, innovation, and scalable implementation. And what I mean is really truly cultivating leaders, really truly growing leadership within the practice on scale. And that part, even when we go into words like brand, right? The word brand in a sense is it almost seems fluffy because it feels so qualitative in nature. You almost can't even grab it. And so when people talk about, I'm going to build a company's brand, for instance, that's a hard thing to think about investing and grasping. But we do know that organizations that all speak the same language, inside and outside, that all look uniform, that handle conflict the same way, they're prepared to resolve difficult challenges the same way. When we start to look at organizations that actually have leadership teams, scale leadership, grow leadership, speak commonly, it's something that we think that happens a lot. And in fact, when I coach doctors, a lot of times they think that they're already at the top of the leadership spectrum for some reason, but there's so much work to do usually in the growth of leadership. And I see so many practices get caught there. Even if they have the operations and they get that down, leadership is something that lacks. And it's one of the reasons why this was, I formed this company called Tower Leadership, because even 15 years ago, I was like, it's the leaders. It's the leadership. There's no comment. The leadership's lagging. And so we can't get the leadership actually.
You can't do anything else. It's like, oh, I'm amazing clinically. It doesn't matter because you stink at leadership. Oh, we're amazing at getting new patients. Well, it doesn't matter because you're not good at leadership. I totally agree.
Like I just lost 4 doctors. And then it's one of those ones where it's like, well, then I can't, one of the biggest problems for all businesses, especially dental, is attracting and retaining talent. And if you're trying to grow on scale, how do you grow on scale without attracting and retaining talent? Now, the number one thing that people tend to move towards is this, well, I'll just pay them more, or I'll just give them a bigger bonus. And anyone who has researched HR in any way, dental or not, knows that that's just not the case. But yet we still see people doing the exact same thing as they were doing 20 years ago. I mean, we're seeing it. We're still seeing people use antiquated systems in a completely different environment. And leadership could not be, I mean, it's more important than it ever has been, especially to differentiate in a commoditized world.
Yeah, that's a great point. So what is your fifth one?
Capital strategy and model duplication. Because if we get all this locked in, if we're learning how to scale and we build out operations and we can build our leadership, now we've really got to get to the point where we can utilize capital, invest capital, duplicate the model, because now we have a model that we can duplicate. And getting to that place, and even when we get to that place sometimes, and so I had a call yesterday not yesterday, it was Friday. So where I was on a call and it was really about, they had gotten through all those other steps, but when it came to model duplication, the true finance around that, the numbers, the pro formas, really investing into a model, because sometimes even going into growth, sometimes they don't know why they should be acquisition or de novo and those types of things. So putting that into a scalable model and then investing the capital, once you get great at that, once you've done all the other pieces and you can invest in that, then you can start growing at a different, obviously, pace, but you have something that's truly scalable. And when I put those out, I was just on a plane and I was just writing those out. This was last week or so, and I was writing this out for a group I was talking to. I said, it's amazing how many people get stuck along the way, but if you ask them, they're already at number 5. And so we see all the time practices that come to us that are 3, 4, 5 locations, but probably shouldn't have moved past 2 because they're either not maximizing profit per fixed cost, they haven't built out their operations, they haven't built scalability, they just started buying. And so really helping them understand what slowed them down from that exponential growth. Because I think people, I know they get stuck. We're seeing it all the time. And profitability is slipping because of it. Profitability is it's being weighed down as they tend to grow. We see it all the time.
Yeah, not only that, the market has changed. So the old school pre-COVID market was, if I get 50 new, I'm just making up a number, but if I get 50 new patients a month, I'm going to be profitable. I'm going to make a ton of money. And everything else just fell in line with that. And that was like literally the main KPI from a profitability standpoint, was just like, just give me 50 new patients, bro. But now there's this, whatever you want to call it, a recession we're in or whatever. People are buying less treatment. People are more thrifty or whatever. Then you also have insurance rates are not reimbursing what they were. And then you also have labor cost up, and you also have cost of goods are up. When you combine all those things, like, you're getting whacked. That model doesn't actually work the same way. So now dentists are like, well, I've always only needed 50 new patients to be profitable, but it's not working out that way anymore. It's a much more complex model that we're playing with. It's to be honest with you, it's more similar to like regular businesses that we get into, right? Like I've dealt with this stuff forever, and it hurts my brain, but it's like part of business. How are you helping people kind of walk through that? Because all these things you just listed are kind of tied back in to what I just described there.
Well, let's go back down to one that affects you directly, which is even at number 3, operational mastery. When we get into that place, marketing is a key one. And it's one of those ones where, so this is a great example. I just had a doctor, it was just maybe a month ago. We get on this Zoom and he says, Eric, my marketing's not working. And I had a vibe board behind me. So I put in like quotations, working. So I was like, what does that mean? And he says, well, we're not, he says, I really don't know, when I got the truth out of him. And I said, okay, tell me more about that. And even then he was like, I said, how many leads did you get last month? He said, I have no idea, Eric. I was like, okay. And he was about to fire his marketing company. And then by the time we got done with everything, he realized it was on his end where they were not converting the leads. But even then, even the conversion game, I was telling somebody in 2019, I was sitting down with 2 doctors and I said, no one's doing digital marketing. There are no doctors right now doing digital marketing. If they would figure that out, and that was just 2019, which shows how fast it moves. And I said, really, like, no, I never see digital marketing. If you get really great at funnels and utilizing the digital marketing and becoming sophisticated, man, you could do some crazy things. Well, now let's fast forward to 2024. Well, everyone's doing digital marketing, right? So now the market space is flooded with digital marketing, but yet conversions, the same conversion for a lot of businesses that was happening in 1984.
I would argue it's worse. Yeah, but the unanswered call rate right now in dental average during normal business hours, 35% goes unanswered. Like imagine any other business that did that 35% of their calls just didn't get answered. You wouldn't be able to even operate. You would be out of business in 2 months. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like you just wouldn't be in existence.
But even going into that, where we're talking about, because we could talk about profitability and accounting and all those things all day long, but just staying with this thought process is exactly what they're making investments in major investments, especially the people that are moving into the full art space, major investments into marketing. But yet, even those investments, they're not actually building what it takes to convert on those major investments. And so we're still not using the models we need to get the results they want. So, I mean, I saw someone recently that was spending $40,000 a month, Gary, and yet they had one new start. This is where we're at. This stuff it's happening in the marketplace. Even though that might blow people's mind, we're seeing that. So that's a great example of sophistication around marketing systems, but not sophistication on operations and the ability to actually be on the backside of that. And now
market's outpacing some of these offices, right? So it's like maybe the marketing company is the best marketing company in the whole world, or maybe you have the best equipment and technology that we've ever had in dentistry ever. But that middle piece that connects those two things, the operations, is crumbling around you, and there's been no upgrade to it in forever. And I know that's what you guys are really good with, but let's be honest. People don't get really excited when I go out to an event. It's like, let's talk about operations. Like the dentists love talking about marketing. Even if somebody's marketing's perfect, they'll come listen to a new marketing idea. And everybody loves talking about tech. Everybody, like, even if you have all the tech in the world, the next new tech thing that comes out, you want to hear about it. How much is that? You know what I mean? Like, but nobody wants to talk about how to manage your team better and be a better leader. How do you grow personally? And so one of the things I was just spoke at Dental Intel, and one of the conversations I had with multiple people was the dental industry has gotten to this place that we have to give people what they want so we can give them what they need, which stinks. But let's be honest, there's too many new patients and there's not enough doctors. That's where we're at in the dental industry. So and this happens to be what you guys solve. So like, how somebody listening to this, it's 99% of the time, it's not a marketing problem that you have. And I'm not saying that for self-preservation. It's just like the truth when I see it. It's like your team isn't motivated to answer the phone or to say the right things that they've been trained to say. So walk me through how you guys help leaders fix this problem that we're diving now at the core of.
I think that the very first thing is, believe it or not, most people, because I can answer a question a lot of different ways, Gary, and most people still do not have that great grand view of where they're going or what it takes to get there. And I know that's zooming out for a minute, but most people don't really know what it's required for them to get the result they're talking about. If they're talking about going 4 locations or 20 locations or even staying at one large location, they still aren't seeing what it actually takes to do that. A lot of the information they get are on some simple tactics, i.e. being more proficient at scheduling and those types of things, but their moves are way more sophisticated. And I'll give you an example that's completely out. It's still operations, but it's to the side. So I had a doctor I pulled up the other day, a large DSO. And I said, let me show you what they're doing. And I was in a conference room full of doctors. I said, let me just pull up YouTube and show you what they're doing. And I'll be honest with you, their ads were compelling. They were heartfelt. They were genuine. They were like, it made you want to work there. And I'm not a dental, like I couldn't do dental hygiene if I wanted to, but I was like, man, if I was a dental hygienist, I would go work for this group. Now, interesting. So then I played actually one of the doctor's ads and I said, and then I showed the ads and I showed the difference and I showed the funnels and we started talking about the sophistication, and I'm using HR just because we're talking about, I want to talk about away from marketing. Let's just talk about talent. You're talking about groups putting out beautiful branded pieces that are hitting the heart, that are talking about long-term trajectory. And in one of these ads, the lady who was talking, she was an clinical hygienist, but she had a suit on. I said, that suit's not an accident. She's seeing her future here. She's seeing her ability to grow. One of the things we teach doctors is how, or practices are how to implement direction. McKinsey did a study back, I believe it's 2017. They did a study over 100 countries, over 1,500 companies, and they said, what contributes to EBITDA the most? And they wanted to know what that would be. And they were like, hey, what is it? I mean, it's got to, maybe it's finances, maybe it's strong CFO, strong financial teams, strong financial. They thought it was that. And so they were like, okay, well, let's go there first. And they actually realized that was number 4. So they were like, okay, well, it's not financial teams. What is it? And so then they studied it further and they said, okay, maybe it's leadership. You would think it would be, maybe it's leadership, but it wasn't. Leadership came in 3. You have scalable leadership, strong leaderships and positions, and coachable leadership. Then they looked at further and they said, okay, well, maybe it's process and technology and those types of things, SOPs, training, onboarding, but that wasn't it either. That came in number 2. The number 1 thing that affected growth and profitability was direction. We're still in a day and age where people come into a practice today as an associate has no idea what their future holds. The front desk has no idea what their future holds. The hygienist has no idea what their future holds. We've commoditized HR into the practices are like, maybe I'll just give them some more money. How about give them direction? Because there's no career path. And in that ad, that group they did something really smart. By putting that hygienist in a suit and saying regional director or whatever, what it did was it gave the hygienist looking at that ad direction. And so that person saying, I can become in my career a blank, regional director as a hygienist. Maybe I'll make, whatever the salary is, 200 grand or whatever it is someday. And then you're offering $30 an hour, $40 an hour, $50 an hour, whatever your market dictates. And you're wondering, why can't I get this person to show up? And believe it or not, that's still operations. That's still building out the ability to build out funnels, communication, building out. Now, part of that's leadership too, and those types of things. But it's just showing how much you have to do if you really, truly want to grow and scale this thing.
That's so good. I couldn't figure out which direction you were going with that, but that is exactly the problem. And everybody's struggling with it. Let's be honest, even some of the big DSOs now are struggling with it, and they're going back and they're changing their models. They're changing how they work with doctors and hygienists and all these kind of things, because we got to a weird place in the dental industry where it wasn't a patient problem that we had. It was a provider problem that we have. And everybody is having that for different reasons. And the dental schools aren't solving it, right? Like the dental schools are just like, here's a kid that's barely done any dentistry at all, but they got the certificate. You guys, you train them now, world. And so it's getting complex. It's getting harder. And the people who have the soft skills are going to be the people who end up winning the game, which is totally counterintuitive, because it's like, wait, I had the spreadsheet. I had all these different things in place. We got the funding. But it's like, no, it doesn't matter if you have the funding and the spreadsheet with all the tables in it. It's like that doctor doesn't want to work with you anymore. And I'm seeing this actually in full circle in these markets where people are like, Gary, I've done everything, but I can't hire a hygienist, so I can't grow. And it's like, well, you can reach a point in your market because you're local. You're not national like Eric's and I's company. We're national, so we can work anywhere in the world technically. Yeah, dental's not that way. You need a hygienist that lives near your office that can work there. And guess what? Word's gotten out that hygienists don't want to work there. And they've already told everybody, and the temp agencies don't want to even use you anymore. And there's nothing anybody can do now at this point. You've burnt the bridge. Does that make sense?
100%. It's interesting because as a firm, we are very quantitative also by nature, and we've got tax and accounting teams, we've got advisory teams, we've got consult. We do a lot of very sophisticated math, and we get into that side of the business as well. But I think we get so far in that, we'll call that the science, right? So we get so far in the science of the business. But when we get to the other side of this, I'll go to a practice that I've worked with for years that because people don't want to hear it. They want to figure out the quickest way to get someone to start with the company, whether it's a recruiter or an ad. And I always say, build it And so I've got a group out of the Midwest, and they put at the top of their funnel, their flywheel, I should say, they put down culture. And when I say culture, I don't mean like throwing a little party here and there. I mean like investing heavily into education, into different teams, and it's just a pretty complex system. And I told him, I said, eventually you guys are going to lead the industry in what you guys are doing, but they've built this entire system. They have more doctors and hygienists than they can hire. They have so many of them coming in. They're like, Eric, we did what you told us to do, and now we literally can't place these doctors. We don't have enough locations to place these doctors, which goes back to your point, which is it's that those soft skills that if you build out, which is why I put that at number 4, because it's like you not to say that's a 4 is important. It's just to say that you have to have the operations to then be able to get all this stuff implemented so that you can build out soft skills on scale, so to speak, so that you're communicating to the marketplace. Now, you don't need to wait to do that. You don't need to wait till your operations are perfect. Certainly not. It can come from one dynamic leader. It can come from an organization. It can come from core values in a lot of other places. But gosh, those things matter. And nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to hear it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not fun to talk about. Like you said, it's not.
It's the simple things though. You got to give the people what they want so you can give them what they need, right? Every night, or every time my kids get sick, they need medicine, but they don't want to eat the medicine because it tastes nasty. So guess what we do? We put a little sugar with it. We put it in their chocolate milk or whatever their favorite drink is. And we're just like, here, you can have your favorite drink because the medicine it is in it with it. And that's where the dental industry is right now. It's like everybody wants the sexy, fun stuff, but very few people want the simple, hard things that everybody has to do. Every business has to do out there. And that's what you guys are so good at working in with your clients. And I've seen it firsthand. What if someone wants to reach out to you guys and learn more about what you're doing and learn how to break through these ceilings? What's the best way to get in contact with you guys?
If someone sends an email to info@towerleadership.com, our team will reach out right away. We'd love to help in any way. This is a challenging marketplace, and it is one that's fun. I actually think that's what we're saying. It's a fun marketplace. And the thing I will say is that right now, so many people are trying to go 1 location, 2 location, 3 location, 5, whatever the scale is. And we start to make some of the tactical moves that we all want to make. And those are important too. And some of the small, linear type moves, but to really truly grow on scale, it's not about just acquiring practices. You can acquire practices. It's not that hard to acquire practices, but to build this something scalable, that's repeatable, that retains talent, those types of things, it is very sophisticated. It is really tough, and it takes a lot of work, and it's not, it's just not, but with the right coaching and the right advice around you, it's all something you can do, but you have to be willing to do it different than most of the things you actually see in the marketplace.
So good, man. As always, every time we talk, we ran over, we went longer than we were supposed to, but the audience, it's one of those nuanced conversations. I know people are going to get into it and be like, wait a second, what exactly are they talking about? And as they get to the end of the conversation, they're going to realize like, oh man, I got some work to do on that. So Eric, I really appreciate your time as always. And you just do an amazing job, and you really dive deeper than what most people are willing to go. So thank you for coming on today.
You too, my friend. Keep up the good work. We love the work you guys do. We love sending people over to you guys. Thank you so much.